Hey everyone, welcome back to Plainclothes Faith Everyday Bible. Before we get rolling, I want to start with a quick apology. I know I didn't release an episode last week. I was away on vacation, taking some slow down time and some time to rest and be present with family. It was refreshing, but I genuinely miss sitting down with you like this. So thank you for your patience, your grace, and for jumping right back in with me today. Now, let's go. Let's go ahead and get started. I want to welcome you to episode 9, The Practice of Service, a Life That Looks Like Jesus. Last week in episode 8, we talked about the fellowship of faith, how Christian community isn't just a bonus to discipleship, but essential, how we grow best when we grow together. But here's the thing, healthy fellowship doesn't just exist. Healthy fellowship produces something. It moves outward and it makes us useful in the hands of God. And that's where today's theme comes in, service. Before we go anywhere, let's look at our theme verse today, which is Mark 10:45. For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. Charles Spurgeon put it like this: those who would be like Christ must be servants, for he was the servant of all. End quote. If the King of Heaven came not to be served, but to serve, then following him means adopting the same posture. So today we'll walk through 3 truths that shape the life of the Christ-centered service. 1, service begins with Jesus. 2, service forms Christ in us. And 3, service displays Christ to the world. Let's begin where all true discipleship begins, with Jesus himself. And that brings us to our first topic, which is service begins with Jesus. In John 13, Jesus does something almost unthinkable. He gets up from dinner, wraps a towel around his waist, he kneels and washes his disciples' feet. That wasn't a symbolic gesture. It wasn't staged. It wasn't a sermon illustration. It was real in the moment service. John 13, 14, and 15 puts it this way: if I, the Lord and teacher, washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. For I gave you an example, so that you also would do just as I did for you. Jesus wasn't just giving them a lesson, he was giving them a lifestyle. In fact, A.I. Packer once said, the measure of all your service is the measure of our willingness to stoop. Serving like Jesus means we do the quiet things, the humble things, the small things, even when no one notices. Think about the ministry of Jesus. So many of his greatest moments were the simple ones: healing one person at a time, stopping to listen, touching those others avoided, feeding the hungry, walking dusty roads just to be present with people. Jesus didn't divide his life into big moments and small ones. All of it, his whole entire life was ministry. And if we want to follow him, we don't start by doing spectacular things. We start by doing faithful things. Dietrich Bonhoeffer once wrote, only he who lives by the forgiveness of his sin in Jesus Christ will think little of himself in serving others. Serving others starts with humility, a humility learned from Jesus himself. But here's the beauty of service. When we step into it, something begins to change inside of us. Which brings me to my second topic: service forms Christ in us. Paul writes in Galatians 5:13, through love, serve one another. Service is not just something we do. Service is something God uses to shape us. In fact, Wesley puts it this way: one of the principal rules of religion is to lose no occasion of serving, end quote. Why? Because service chivels away parts of us that don't look like Christ. Serving teaches us patience. It teaches us compassion. It exposes our selfishness and it grows our empathy. It humbles us. It stretches us. It starts to form Christ's life in us. I'll use a personal example. I serve on our church's technical arts ministry team. And there have been moments when I've seen others get something that I've tried to do or that I've wanted to do, and I get jealous. But then I remember that I'm not there to do those big roles. I'm there to serve and be humble. And a lot of times when I remember that I'm there to serve and be humble, that's when Christ speaks into my life, or he brings others into my life to speak into me. And another good example is our men's retreat. When we show up and we carry all the normal weight of life, whether it's a men's retreat or a women's retreat, we carry stress, we carry fear, we carry family pressure, grief, those hidden battles that nobody else can see. And you see it in the faces of the people who come to those events. The men and women who come to those events, usually they stand tall, but people walk in a little slower, a little heavier. But what transforms from those weekends, it's not the sermons. It's the way men and women serve each other. At our men's retreat, I watched as men put their arm around one another, stop to pray in the middle of the hallway, listen without judgment, help without needing credit, and encourage with sincerity. And the atmosphere changes at those events because service changes it. And at the end of our men's retreat one weekend, a newer guy said to me, I've never seen men care for each other like this. And he wasn't responding to the sermon. He was responding to what he saw from that event, what he saw men doing for each other. Richard Foster once said, more than any other single way, the grace of humility is worked into our lives through the discipline of service. Service doesn't just impact the person receiving it, it impacts the person offering it. And that brings us to one more truth, because when God shapes us through service, he uses that service to shape the world around us. In James 2:17, James writes, faith, if it has no works, is dead, not because works save us, but because real faith produces real fruit. In Matthew 25:40, Jesus said, to the extent that you did it to one of the least of these brothers or sisters of mine, you did it to me. Every act of service, even when no one sees, is an act of worship. Tertullian wrote in the 2nd century that unbelievers marveled at the early Christians, saying, behold how they love one another, end quote. It was their love, their service, their sacrificial care that made Jesus visible. People may reject our doctrine, ignore our sermons, and scroll past our post, but they cannot ignore genuine love lived out in front of them. Service is evangelism in motion. It's theology with hands and feet. So how can we live this out practically? Here are some simple steps. Pray every morning. Lord, make me available today. Serve without waiting to be asked. Cook for someone going through a hard time. Check on someone grieving or stressed. Send an encouraging message today. Volunteer quietly at church. Look for the unnoticed tasks and do them. And most importantly, be interruptible. In fact, C.S. Lewis once said, the great thing, if one can, is to stop regarding all the unpleasant things as interruptions of one's own life. Quote, some of Jesus's, greatest ministry moments were interruptions. So in closing, let me ask you, who can you serve this week? A coworker who feels invisible, a family member who needs support, a neighbor who's a single parent who might be overwhelmed, someone at church who's struggling. Don't wait for the big visible opportunity. Look for the simple one. So for this week, your challenge is serve one person every single day, intentionally, lovingly, and quietly. No spotlight, no applause, just faithful obedience. Because when God's people serve, Jesus becomes visible. Hey, thanks for joining us for Plainclothes Faith. And don't forget to swing by next week for episode 10, Strength to Finish the Race. We'll talk about perseverance, how to keep going when life gets hard and faith feels stretched thin. You don't want to miss it. And if this episode encouraged you, share it, leave a review, and subscribe so you don't miss what's next. Until next time, keep walking with Jesus, one word, one step, one day at a time.